Hello and welcome to another video in our Health Behavior Theory video series. I'm Dr. Lori Wagner, and this video covers the theory of reasoned action and planned behavior. My personal favorite. There she is. This theory, as its name implies, is actually a compilation of the theory of reasoned action with the addition of the planned behavior constructs. What I love about this theory is that it really helps us plan out behaviors. As a person who focuses on prevention for a living and frankly who manages their anxiety with habits and routines, I personally find the theory of reasoned action and planned behavior to be one of the most powerful motivators for behavioral actions. What I find, especially with the population I'm generally working with, which would be emerging adults on a college campus, otherwise known as college students, is that it's not uncommon that often the health behaviors, when looked at retrospectively, were lacking in the planning phase. So folks will speak a lot about unintentional outcomes. I didn't mean for that to happen, they'll say. I often cite an old Rush song that said, "If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice." I believe the same is true for behavioral planning. When we choose not to plan our behaviors, then we're choosing for the outcomes to be much less within our control and less predictable. Planning what we're going to have for dinner, for example, is generally more likely to have a healthy outcome than when we're just hungry and now standing at the fridge or going through the line or driving up the street or looking through the restaurants in town to decide what we're having for dinner. Now, this is not to say that planning always connects the outcomes with our intentions, as we'll see here in a second as we transition to the visual representation of the model so we can look at it more closely. This theory is not that different in that ultimately it's looking to predict, understand, and empower folks to have some control over their behaviors. This all starts with attitudes. This is actually a good point in the video to remind us that constructs from individual theories and models often work in conjunction with each other to get us to where we really need to be to plan appropriately. So the attitudes portion of this theory sometimes can be simply replaced by the health belief model. And what I mean by this is not that we would actually put the health belief model inside of this theory, but rather that all the things that we can capture and learn from the health belief model help us inform the attitudes that might be leading to our intentions in this theory. So let's get practical. Say we're looking to tackle the concept of driving under the influence of alcohol. A person's attitudes might be that driving under the influence is not that big of a deal. Maybe they think they're good at it. Maybe their drive home from the bar or party isn't very long, and so they think their relative risk in that short amount of driving is low. Can you hear all the constructs of the health behavior theory in my health belief model in my rationale? Conversely, a person might be vehemently opposed to driving while under the influence, in which case they're much more likely to take actions to prevent themselves from participating in that behavior. So here's where the intentions come in then, right? If a person doesn't intend to consume alcohol and then drive home, they're likely going to make better plans when going to the party. Perhaps designate a driver who remains sober and takes the friend group home. Perhaps get a ride to the party and make sure a rideshare app is working and available in the area. Maybe even plan for a backup if they decide to get drunk but not drive home. Perhaps decide to go to the party but not drink alcohol, or at least not drink alcohol to the point of intoxication. Now, we all know that things can happen and that the things we plan don't always work out the way we hoped. A person who planned on not drinking at a party might find the party to be really fun. Perhaps the pressure to consume alcohol is a little strong, and so the person ends up intoxicated, though their plan or intention was not to do so. Having a backup plan would facilitate this change in plans, not then leading to the behavior they were intending to avoid to begin with, which in this case was to drive while under the influence. So let's bring in the environment. Now, I know that as we age, we like to believe that we are above peer pressure and that the things that the people around us might be trying to encourage us to do or not do don't affect us. Here again, there is a generally large body of research that says though we might like to believe this, it is not true. Human beings generally seek approval from their peers and the people around them, and therefore are affected by their influences. Now, this could be negative or positive. So if the party is really good, perhaps it's our friend's birthday and they're pressuring us to do shots to help celebrate with them, our intention fades and we end up being under the influence of alcohol and then needing to find a way to get home without driving under the influence. Now, here's where we don't have to revisit this model every single time we make a health decision or every single day of our lives. So if we're likely to be encouraged by others to drink even though we didn't want to, there's a decent likelihood that this is a regular occurrence for us, and therefore we could plan for that as well. Let's take our party example in a different direction for a second. Perhaps our attitudes were that this was our friend's birthday party. We were there to have a good time. We might have attitudes and values that are in opposition to having unprotected sexual activity, but then when we arrived at the party, remember the environment we said was really fun. There were lots of people. We've all been trapped for months and months as part of a global pandemic, and this is a post-pandemic party. Woohoo! And so we are ready to really have some fun. Now, when we planned for the party, we didn't think about how to get home. We did think about how to get home and what to wear and how we looked, but we weren't necessarily thinking about the person we might meet a couple hours into that party. Perhaps we didn't intend to hook up with anyone and therefore didn't have any disease prevention mechanisms on our person. Though we would have stated outside of the party environment that we had a lot of respect for sexual health and had an understanding of the importance of using prophylactics to prevent the transmission of STIs, and also weren't that interested in becoming parents should our sexual behaviors be the kind that could result in pregnancy. But at the party, we see the most beautiful person we've ever seen in our lives. They're all of the things we would hope to find in a partner. So though we weren't prepared and didn't think this was going to happen at the end of the night, we might find ourselves with this new friend engaging in sexual activity. Were we prepared? Perhaps we didn't have condoms on us at the party. Oops, there we go. But they're in our apartment. Perhaps one of us has pregnancy potential on the list of outcomes and therefore was managing fertility with a contraceptive or not. In fact, one of the biggest downsides of abstinence-only education, especially the versions that encourage people to be abstinent until they are legally married, often neglect to encourage people to have a backup plan. And this is why abstinence actually has one of the lowest user effectiveness rates. Because when things get heated and people are inspired to engage in sexual activity, they are very unlikely to have planned for it and to be prepared to protect themselves and their partner. So let's bring in our last little set of constructs from the side where we can see that we also need to focus on an individual's perception, their perspective, so to speak, of their ability to control the opportunities, access to resources, and the skills. Still sounding reminiscent of the health belief model, no? So does our individual believe they can control the opportunity? Do they believe they have the resources? Do they believe they have the skills? Can they control themselves? The best example of this for me is, again, how folks explain an event after it has occurred. The series of events, unfortunate or otherwise, that occur up to an outcome, I think, are really important to examine. Now, I like to use my littlest brother for this example. In a phone call with my brother once, he was relaying the activities of an evening that led to him being charged with public intoxication and domestic violence. His explanation was that as a veteran, and his story starts on Veterans Day, people were buying him shots to thank him for his service, which on this particular evening led to him becoming more intoxicated than perhaps he had intended. Though if we're being honest, I'm not sure he had any intentions relative to the level of his intoxication that evening. He tends to be more of a free spirit and is more likely to think that whatever happens should be allowed to happen. We are very different that way. So then in his intoxicated state, he was cogent enough to choose not to drive and instead asked his girlfriend to do so. Somewhere along the way, though, there was a miscommunication where, looking back, he realized he had asked his girlfriend to move his car. Now, in the moment, however, when his girlfriend was moving his car, he felt like she was leaving him there, and for one reason or another, threw his cell phone at her. He would say not at her, but in her direction. Kind of remarkably, in my opinion, his cell phone shattered the glass of her vehicle and hit her. A witness to these events was concerned and called in law enforcement. Now, my brother's explanation was that he thought the charge of domestic violence was ridiculous, as he didn't mean to throw the phone at her. I'm not sure how a person throws a phone without intention, but I think his explanation was that he was throwing the phone not thinking it would hit her, but it did. So if we sum up his evaluation of the event, he didn't plan on getting drunk. He didn't plan on not wanting to drive. He didn't plan on getting in an argument with his girlfriend. He didn't plan on hitting his girlfriend with his cell phone. He didn't plan on being arrested that evening, nor spending a good deal amount of time in court explaining and defending his actions. In his explanation, he didn't see where the opportunities were for him to have made better choices. Though I greatly appreciate his service to our country, I don't think it implies he has to drink as many shots as people buy him on Veterans Day. Though I can even appreciate his momentary lapse of memory and therefore his anger at his girlfriend who he perceived was leaving him there and taking his car. I'm not sure that I can rationalize throwing a cell phone, which probably costs upwards of hundreds to $1,000, at his car, both of which things broke. And so now he has a broken cell phone, a broken car window, a broken relationship, and a criminal record. He didn't mean to do any of those things, but he did. Now, nor does he appreciate me asking how, if he had made better choices, his evening likely would have turned out differently, let's be honest. But the whole point of reasoned action plan behavior is just that. Let's use the words explicitly. When there are reasons behind our actions and when we plan our behaviors, our outcomes are more likely to be in our control than when we don't. Spoken like a true control freak, no? So when is reasoned action plan behavior our best theoretical choice? For starters, this theory is helpful with behaviors we can actually plan for. And I would encourage us to be a little bit more liberal in our designation of the things that we can control and the things we can't. Despite his instinct to be respectful of people's appreciation, my brother did not have to drink every shot that was bought for him. And when our behaviors can be planned out, we can encourage folks to plan appropriately. Plan for the things we can expect to happen and potentially also have some backup plans. So reasoned action plan behavior is also best when we need to identify a person's intention. When someone says to me, I didn't mean to do that, my first question is, well, what did you mean to do? And then we can analyze how what they meant to do didn't lead to the outcomes. And generally, that's going to come back to needing to plan. So when we can identify a person's behavioral intentions, we can offer the support for those intentions to lead to their behavior. And we can also look at any barriers that might get in the way. There we go. In between their intention and their behavior and help them try to eliminate those, which should again sound a little like health belief model. And as I said, I used reasoned action plan behavior for many of the elements in my life. It just makes sense to me to plan and to think about what outcomes I'm hoping for or intending, such that my plans match that. At the end of the day, this is also education, right? What are the outcomes anticipated? What are the expectations of the course or the lesson or the program? And then we plan specifically designed for our audience to reach that expectation, to get to that measurable outcome. So there we have the reasoned action and planned behavior theory. Let me move myself over out of the way. There we go. All summed up for you. I hope this helps clarify, as I said, my favorite video. Stay tuned for our continued series as we continue to focus on our health behavior theories with some practical applications. Thank you so much.